I can pretty much guarantee that everyone watching this video recognizes that laugh. Wario's sound effects are as iconic as his obsession with money, his yellow and denim outfits, and his love of garlic. Since 1992, Mario's rival has appeared in tons of Nintendo Universe games, as well as several adventures of his own. He's as iconic as any other member of the Mushroom Kingdom, and if we look over his history and legacy, it's easy to see why. We're gonna do that, but we're also gonna answer some burning questions. Where did Nintendo even get the idea for this big-mouthed, bike-riding, butt-trumpeting weirdo? Why did Nintendo create someone like Wario in the first place? Before we can talk about the origin of Wario, we have to go back even further, back to Mario's first appearance, 1981's Donkey Kong. I promise this will be important for later. Before the world's most famous plumber was called Mario, he was called Jumpman, and before he was Jumpman, he was supposed to be the classic cartoon character Popeye.
I'm Popeye the Sailor Man.
In the very first entry of the Iwata Asks interview series, Nintendo legend Shigeru Miyamoto talked about this. Nintendo was making arcade games, it had the Popeye license, and it wanted to bring the two together. Quote, "That's why at first I was asked if I could make a game using Popeye. The basic concept of Popeye is that there is the hero and his rival who he manages to turn the tables on with the aid of spinach." Of course, this version of Miyamoto's game never happened, resulting in Donkey Kong instead. It was so successful that Nintendo actually did get the all clear to make that Popeye game. It wasn't the original pitch, but it's easy to imagine what Miyamoto had envisioned for the game. Mario, aka Jumpman, was the stand-in for Popeye. Donkey Kong himself was Bluto, and Pauline was kidnapped instead of Olive Oil, whom the two sailors are always fighting over. Pauline would later make appearances in Super Mario Odyssey and Mario Kart, and Donkey Kong has had his own series of games for as long as Mario himself. There's a history of Mario's supporting cast being introduced, then moving on to bigger and better things.
And some of us are still waiting our turn.
I know. I'm on your team, Waluigi. As for Wario, he debuted in 1992's Super Mario Land 2, 6 Golden Coins, on the Game Boy. While Mario was off doing his thing in Mario Land 1, Wario decided to take over his castle while it was vacant. The man's obsession with treasure and fancy things was there from the start. The only way for Mario to take the castle back is to collect the titular golden coins, open the gate, survive Wario's deadly obstacle course, and take him down. We'll talk more about the game itself in a moment, because first, we need to hear from the developers. Why was Wario created? In a 1992 interview, Mario Land 2 director Hiroji Kiyotaki gave us a very succinct answer. We imagined Wario as the Bluto to Mario's Popeye. Now, where have we heard that before? I know what you're thinking. Didn't we just learn that Donkey Kong was supposed to be Bluto? Well, yes, but that doesn't mean we can't have more than one. Maybe Kiyotaki saw the cartoon where Popeye fights some literal primates and thought he should give the Bluto thing another go. Turns out it's a lot simpler than that. The team wanted a rival for Mario, so they made one. Quote, "The truth is, we kind of came up with the idea of the name first, and everything else came after. Since he was a Warui, or bad guy, he should be called Wario. And we had the idea to flip the M upside down. Wario has been an icon ever since, even if the Bluto thing isn't as well known. To be fair, there are other parts of Wario's origin story that aren't really considered canon anymore either. In the same interview, Kiyotaki stated that Mario and Wario were rumored to be childhood friends, and that his favorite food is crepes. That first part might explain why he still gets invited to the parties and sports games, but garlic has definitely overtaken crepes as Wario's favorite food. So now we know why Nintendo made Wario in the first place. But if I'm being honest, I don't think that slapdash origin of the character is enough for me. We can go deeper. We can also understand why Nintendo gave Wario his own game.
And maybe someday I understand why I get left out.
Let me tell you a tale of two lands. Well, I guess it's actually 3. The first Super Mario Land on Game Boy is interesting. It's set in Sarasa Land rather than the Mushroom Kingdom, which might explain the offbeat art style, the bouncy rubber balls instead of fireballs, the split-level ending of each course, and all the other little changes along the way. It all feels a bit wrong, to be honest. But I can't be too harsh when the game introduced Princess Daisy and gave us one of the best Mario music tracks of all time. At worst, Super Mario Land 1 can feel like a knockoff. At best, at least in my opinion, it's a Mario game searching for its own identity. Fortunately, the follow-up found it in 1992. Super Mario Land 2 is also a bit strange, but at least it has cohesion. It's a happy medium between the first game's weirdness and what Mario players expected at the time. That's by design. To quote the director again, with Super Mario Land 2, one of our ideas was to not be bound by the conventions of the previous games. However, we realized we were on the wrong path, so we toned down that idea and made something a little closer to the existing Mario world. What that means for Mario Land 2 is that we get regular fireballs, but also a fun floaty hat with rabbit ears. We get regular Goombas and Piranha Plants, but also a bunch of wacky new enemies like walking Jason Voorhees masks and spiked ants. The most important part of this experimentation in my eyes is the more open-ended level design. Super Mario Bros. Has had special bonus rooms off of the critical path since the beginning, but Mario Land 2 is a different beast. Some stages have 2 distinct paths through almost the entire level, and the submarine in the Turtle Zone feels like a straight-up maze. Above all else, you can visit the game's 6 zones and collect their golden coins in any order. This non-linear approach played a big part in prompting Nintendo to keep making the Super Mario Land games, just without the title character himself. These fresh ideas demanded to be explored further, but Mario wasn't the right person to do it. This simple swap solves the problem of Super Mario Land 1. By changing the protagonist, no one can complain about it not feeling like a Mario game, because now it isn't. It's a Wario game. 1994's Super Mario Land 3 is Wario Land. Even from the file select screen, you can see an immediate difference. Wario had already appeared in the previous game, but crashing into frame sets up new expectations for his playable debut. He can jump onto enemies' heads like Mario, but unlike the plumber, he can also pick them up and throw them around the level. He also has a shoulder charge, slamming into enemies and bricks from the side. Mario wouldn't be able to do anything quite like that himself until Super Mario Wonder's Elephant Fruit. Speaking of power-ups, Wario's helmets have a different feel from Mario's caps. Mario throws fireballs with a fire flower, but Wario gets a full-on flamethrower from his forehead with the dragon helmet. It's a slightly more brutal version of the same ability, one that really only fits with a burlier guy like Wario. Design trends like non-linear levels and bangin' music continue in Wario Land as well. Rice Beach is a bop. Let's pause on those non-linear levels, because it's a concept that needed more than one game to explore. In fact, I'd say it took Nintendo a few tries to really nail it. We've learned why Wario was created and why he got his own game, but now we can look at why the Wario Land series had to keep going. Wario's next adventure took him to the Game Boy Color. 1998's Wario Land 2 is where he started to differentiate himself from his rival even more. The previous game had different power-ups and enemies, but Wario still took damage and shrunk when hit. That changed with the sequel. This time, Wario was invincible. In fact, getting knocked around the level by traps and enemy attacks was how you solved platforming puzzles. For example, rather than shrink down after taking damage, Wario got squashed by heavy enemies and used his flattened form to slide through narrow openings and flit through the air like a leaf. Instead of using a fire flower or dragon helmet to burn through certain blocks, he could be set on fire to melt right through them himself. Beyond this light puzzle platforming, Wario's greed continued to shine, as he collected a gazillion coins in every level, to be spent on various bonus games. 2 years later, Wario got sucked into a magical music box to kick off Wario Land 3. This is where we start to see all these creative ideas come together. Non-linearity had been creeping in ever since Mario Land 2, but Wario Land 3 is where Nintendo really set players loose. Every stage here is expansive, absolutely loaded with keys that unlock bonus treasures and critical items that let you access new levels. You're free to bounce around the whole map and revisit each course, and as you do, you'll get more of those wacky reactions that were introduced in the previous game. For example, Wario can once again be set on fire to burn through certain blocks. Contrast this with how Mario reacts upon getting burned. And it's clear that Nintendo could only keep exploring these ideas with Wario. They were perfected in Wario Land 4, which brought our greedy guy to the Game Boy Advance in 2001. For my money, this is the best of the bunch. Wario's movement had never felt so smooth, and his new sprint ability took his shoulder charge to the next level. Speaking of levels, Wario Land 4 did something that no other game in the series, nor anything in Mario's whole platforming collection for that matter, had ever attempted. These levels aren't a matter of getting from point A to point B. You have to get there, then return to point A, escaping each level in time with a bird key you find along the way. This gathers all the non-linear level ideas from the previous games and takes them to their logical conclusion. Every level is sprawling, with tons of optional side rooms and bonus gems to find. And once you finally explore every corner and activate the frog statue, you have to double back. In many cases, taking secondary paths you couldn't even access from the other direction. On top of all that, you can go through each of the game zones in any order you want after the tutorial, just to throw even more non-linearity in there. Wario Land 4 tied a beautiful bow on the ideas that had been circulating since Super Mario Land 2, even justifying the weird experimentation of Mario Land 1 before that. You can see how Nintendo's seeds of creativity were planted, cultivated, and ultimately bloomed into something spectacular. And just as adult flowers pollinate new plants, Wario Land 4 itself hinted toward what was coming next. Yes, this beloved platformer actually shares DNA with WarioWare. I've talked about that series on this channel before, and my love for it started with the very first game in 2003. The idea of seconds-long minigames, aka Microgames, was so different at the time, and to this day, very few other developers have ever tried to replicate it. But when I look at the aesthetics and little touches around Wario Land 4, I can see the early pieces of WarioWare. The style of the soundtrack is exactly the same, and I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say the escape timer was shrunk down to be the microgame timer. It's certainly not the first time we've seen little games within the bigger game either. Bonus games have been a part of every single adventure with land in its name, from Super Mario Land 2's slot machine to Wario Land 4's minigame shop. There's a trio you can try out anytime, and the better you do, the more boosters you can take into the game's boss levels. Wario's Home Run Derby, Wario Hop, and Wario's Roulette are your choices, and you'll find reskins of them in the first WarioWare game too, along with, a ton of silly stuff. That silly stuff continued for decades, and at this point, there are more WarioWare games than Wario platformers. It's honestly impressive just how expansive Wario's world has gotten since his first appearance. His nemesis, Captain Syrup, has served as the villain in several Wario Land games, though she's noticeably absent in WarioWare. Even so, that series has brought us the likes of disco sports fan Jimmy T, Hungry Alien Orbulon, and Nintendo fanboy 9volt, characters who simply wouldn't fit in with Super Mario's Mushroom Kingdom citizens. Waluigi does, but Nintendo keeps giving him the short straw for some reason.
Just giving me my own game, what are you waiting for?
Don't worry, buddy. I know you'll get your chance someday. For now, you can piggyback on Wario's legacy.
I'll take it.
And what a legacy it is. Why did Nintendo make Wario in the first place? The deviation of Super Mario Land 2 demanded a new villain, and Wario was it. Mario's heroism and selflessness were countered by a total stinker driven by pure greed, the Bluto to Mario's Popeye. Why did we get more? Experimentation with the land games let us spend more time with Wario, taking him from villain to, well, not quite a hero, but a protagonist nonetheless. As Nintendo made its platforming levels less linear and tried out new gameplay concepts like enemy reactions and escape routes, the Wario games came into their own strong identity, culminating with the beloved Wario Land 4. Why is Wario still a superstar today? While the platformers continued after Wario Land 4, a new venture into WarioWare quickly expanded Wario's universe. Silly rapid-fire ideas and a goofy cast of characters is a combination that has delighted fans for decades. So, if you were wondering why any of those things happened, you have your answers now. If this video has encouraged you to give more Wario games a shot, that's awesome. It might be hard to go back to some of the Land games these days, but at a minimum, I cannot recommend Wario Land 4 enough. As for WarioWare, well, honestly, you should play any and all of them. I promise you'll have a good time. Right, Wario?
Whatever.
Let's try that again. What kind of time will they have?
Excellent!
If I don't have my own game, at least I can do the outro. Thank you for watching this video. If you like what Framework is doing, hit that subscribe button in the middle. It would help a lot as we try to reach 10,000. And if you want to see the other stuff we make, I hit that button on the left. Thank you for watching, and we see you next time.